Hello everyone, this is Wes Henson, pastor of the Ridge Church. The Ridge Church campus is located at 7350 Old Highway 13 in Carbondale, Illinois. And I want to thank you for joining me today as we give a quick on-the-go summary of this week's small group Bible study for the week of May the 1st, 2022 at the Ridge Church. This is session 2 of the series, Christ's Return, Living Life with the End in Mind. And today's session is titled, Know What's Coming. And we're going to be studying the scriptures from Matthew chapter 24, verses 15 through 22. If you click on the links, you'll find a printed summary of this week's lesson and a handout. And then I invite you to join us on campus Sunday morning at 9 a.m. or online Tuesday night at 6:30 on Facebook or our website as we go into greater detail. Okay, let's begin. So unfortunately, many of us have gone through painful moments when we felt abandoned or isolated by everyone, including God. And as we continue our study this week on what Jesus said about his return, we will see that God will never forsake us even as the end times draw near. The point of our lesson this week is even in the darkest times, God has not abandoned his people. And so a little background here. Jesus and his disciples have gone up to the Mount of Olives, which overlooks Jerusalem. And Jesus has told them that the temple would soon be destroyed. And this prompted the alarmed disciples to ask questions. And I want to refer you back to verse 3 of Matthew chapter 24. They asked Jesus, tell us, when shall these things be? And the second question they asked was, what shall be the sign of your coming? And then the third question, what will be the sign of the end of the world? Now, Jesus did not answer their second question about the sign, about what sign there will be of his coming, and neither did he answer the question about the final end of the age. Instead, he continued by addressing their first query about the destruction of the temple. So we're going to pick up in verse 15, Matthew chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. Jesus is speaking and he said, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, in parentheses, let the reader understand, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. And so the truth here is that the desecration of the temple signals the coming end. Now, the word here that is rendered abomination appears over 120 times in the Bible. And in every case, the word refers to something detestable. Now, the ultimate abomination, though, is the abomination of desolation, which is a devastating activity that is idolatrous and also an affront to the holiness of God. Now, many scholars have noted that at least a partial fulfillment of this prophecy occurred in 176 BC when Antiochus Epiphanes set up an altar to the Zeus god above the altar of the burnt offerings in the Jerusalem temple. Then the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy will occur when the Antichrist does something very similar to what Antiochus Epiphanes did. But one thing is clear as we read these verses, that Jesus wanted his disciples, and he wants us to know what is coming, what lies ahead. And when God's temple is desecrated, we can know that the end is coming. All right, let's move on down to verses 17 through 20. Verse 17 reads, Jesus again still speaking, a man on the housetop must not come down to get things out of his house, and a man in the field must not go back to get his coat. And woe to the pregnant women and the nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. So the truth here is that the distress that follows will come suddenly. So Jesus points out in this section of Scripture that the end times will bring about destruction very quickly. So quickly, in fact, that believers must waste no time in responding to it. It'd be kind of like a tornado hitting you, and you have no time to gather up your things and flee to safety. Okay, verses 21 and 22. For at that time there will be great distress, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will again. And unless those days were cut short, no one would be saved. But those days will be cut short because of the elect. The truth here is the time of distress will be so severe that God will mercifully cut it short. So Jesus' words here are clear. The end times will include trouble and tribulation. And as difficult as these portions of Scripture are to read, we must be deeply grateful for the mercy of God. Jesus said in verse 22 that God is going to cut it short. He will cut short the days of tribulation. Jesus wanted his disciples, and again, he wanted us to know what the end times would include. And that the point is, even in the darkest times, God has not abandoned his people. That's what the Lord wants you to know today and me to know. So, what steps can we take this week in response to this teaching? Well, let me offer 3. Step number 1, remember. Take a moment and remember all those times when the Lord was with you during a difficult or scary time, and thank the Lord. Step number 2 is reflect. Take a moment and reflect on trials that you have faced recently, difficulties, challenges, and how did you respond to those trials? Were you prepared for them? And then, did you fully trust God during those trials? Or did you let fear or your circumstances distract you? So spend some time in prayer asking God how you can learn from these trials. And then a third step is to react. Is there anything hindering your trust in God or preventing you from sharing the gospel? What is one step that you can take this week to keep your focus on God, not your trials or difficulties, that would help you to learn to trust God more? Okay, let's wrap up this week's time together. Most of us have felt at one time or another abandoned or alone or isolated, and it can be frightening for sure. But it's good to know that those who know Jesus will never have to experience that trauma because he is with us and he will be with us to the very end. Okay, if you click on the links, you're going to find a summary and a handout of this week's lesson, and then join us on campus this Sunday morning at 9 a.m. or online Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. on our Facebook page or our website as we go into detail. Okay, bye for now.